oops. Oh, sorry, that's the pointer, of course. Okay, so just for those of you who don't know about this stunning bird, some of you may think it's ugly. I've heard that comment, but it's actually a gorgeous bird. I'm just going to give you an overview of the bird, and then the reasons, the facts and the figures, and more figures, and then something about its status. Okay. So that's the distribution from the atlas. It's the bulk of the distribution is right in the middle there. Eastern Free State, Mpumalanga, and a bit into KZN. Okay. So it's a southern African endemic with a restricted range. So it occurs in South Africa, Lesotho, and there are two breeding colonies in Swaziland, or two known ones. That there actually might be a third, but they leave Swaziland in winter, so they're just breeding there in summer. So it's remained vulnerable in this recent Red Data Book assessment, and I'll explain a bit why just a bit later. Okay, and the population declined over the past and the end of the previous century. And historical records indicate a large range contraction, which you can see on this map. These are pre-1971 records in brown. They don't occur in all the brown marks now. These are specimens, but they're probably itinerant birds. There were breeding colonies reported in this area, but you can see they've declined to this area now for the last 100 or so years. Okay, to tell you a bit about the breeding biology and how we are estimating the population size. They breed on cliffs and mostly over water, and they sort of long-term monogamy. They lay 1 to 3 eggs, but it's generally 2, and 1 or 2 of those hatch. And they may skip a year if it's very wet or very dry. So they have a sort of long-term, slow population recruitment. We don't know too much about eggs laid or mortality of eggs laid, because you don't always see the eggs in the nests, but we have and are monitoring the chicks that hatch, that survive to fledging between 30 and 60% over different years. And annual survival of first-year birds is about 64%, and then after that they do pretty well at about 90% survival. And they may roost all year at their particular breeding colony. So some colonies, the birds are there throughout the year, but at other colonies they vacate the colony in winter. They have roosting sites in trees that may be near the colony, but they may also be quite far away, and you don't really find them. Or they may join a different colony and roost there in winter. So they don't have a particular pattern, which makes them a bit difficult to monitor in winter. And they do practice a bit of local migration. Some of the Lesotho birds leave the highlands and go down to the lowlands, and the ones in the lowlands may come to us, we don't know. The ones in the Free State might go down to KZN, so we're not quite sure. You'd have to track them to see. Now this is a typical breeding ledge on sandstone with a number of nests, and when the chicks are about a month old, they fledge at about 40 days, somewhere around there, and they start moving around. So if you're trying to do specific breeding analysis of brood size from particular nests, you're at a bit of a loss, because you can have a pile of 5 or 6 chicks on one nest, and you don't know where they come from. And then there's a typical breeding site on dolerite. So it's different. You don't have the same ledges. You have little nooks where they breed individually. Okay, so the fledglings remain with their parents for about 3 or 4 months after leaving the nests, and adults remain at the colonies throughout the breeding season, even if they lose a nest. They'll remain there in their pair, and they generally forage quite close to their colonies. And then there are a lot of non-breeding adults that roost at the breeding colonies, which is important in the population estimates. And post-breeding season, the juveniles migrate locally I've been tracking a few, and after 3 or 4 months they just disappear, and I'm radio tracking them, so I just can't find them, so they go out of range of the radio tracker. Okay, now we get on to the calculations. How are we doing the counting? I've done most of my winter and summer roost surveys in the Free State, where I had found an old unpublished report from the 1970s, which gave counts at a lot of the different colonies. So these I followed up. I mean, they gave the farm name, and sometimes the farms are quite large and they're split into 5. So you have to try and trace these roosts, and it's a bit of a time-consuming task because you can only do one every evening because you have to follow where the birds go. So if you see birds flying to a particular place, then you know that's where the roost is. And so we just count the number of adults, and if we can see, we always count the number of birds, and if you can distinguish between the adults and the juveniles, that's great. So that was the one set of surveys, and the other was doing the breeding colony surveys. And this you can only do during the breeding season, and you're counting the number of nests, chicks and adults, and if you happen to be there, you can do a roost count at the colony too. And so that data I was comparing with historical data collected by conservation departments and from other organizations, nest record cards, national projects such as Birds and Reserve Project and the Atlasing Project, from various individuals, unpublished reports, and interested people. So it's just, I've had help from a lot of people and a lot of sources. And that's a typical winter roost on dead trees, and they roost with other species, from cranes to guinea fowl to cormorants, even starlings. And then a typical summer roost on the breeding cliffs. And that's what I like to see. This is one of the larger colonies. That was over 160 birds. Okay, and then just surveying, out of local interest. Now we get on to the population size. How did we calculate this? So colony size was measured by combining these two sets of information, the evening counts, the roost counts, and then the mid-season breeding counts using the breeding pairs. Okay, so we, through the literature and current observations, we found 362 breeding colony sites for the last 40 years. And between 2007 and 2011, counts were made at 166 of these, including 124 active colonies, with a strange total of 333 birds and 689 breeding pairs. Of the 114 colonies with both historical and recent data, 37 were found to be abandoned. So no birds were present at 32% of these historical sites. So we suggested a global estimate of around 246 active colonies. So that first point, I said detection of colonies was near complete. But since then, I've spoken to David Ambrose and Lady Brand, and talking about Lesotho, and he's certain there's quite a lot of colonies in areas right out in the Bindus that no one's visited. So there are probably quite a few more than this that we've missed. Some of them we'll find, and some of them we won't, unfortunately. But the more the better. And we assigned size estimates to 275 predicted colonies by resampling from a smooth normalized histogram of the counts from 124 recently active colonies, and gives a global estimate of about 7,200 to 8,000 Southern Bald Ibis in total. Okay, so we know the sources, some of the sources of error for this estimate are incomplete knowledge of the number of colonies, because some of the colonies reported might be duplicates, just called by different names. Until we sort all that out, we won't really know. But this is our best stab at it. The colony size is often a problem. People report the colony, but they don't report the size. Okay, and so where counts were available, we used them, but we not acknowledged that some of them might have been winter counts and not summer counts. But where no count was available, but there was some indication of colony size, we assigned an average of the relevant size class: small, medium, large, or very large. Okay, and where there was no indication of size, we made random draws from distribution of colony sizes and well-surveyed sites. Okay, so this was the distribution of colony sizes. This is numbers of birds and colony size, if you can see. So as you can see, the majority of colonies were between 5 and 30 birds, and there were only about 8 colonies that are bigger than 100 birds. Okay, I don't really understand that either, so don't worry about it. But we had to get a mathematical estimation for the fitting of the curve. And so this one seemed to fit our curve the best, so we could estimate the colonies of unknown size. Okay, so and from our colony counts, the roost counts as well as the nest counts of the colonies, we worked out there were about 4 birds per nest. So that gives us about 1,800 breeding pairs, or 1,800 to 2,000 breeding pairs. So previous estimates give about 8,000 to 10,000 individuals. So it's just slightly more than our current estimate, and 2,000 breeding pairs. So they're slightly lower figures, the ones estimated in 2000. Okay, that's just looking at number of nests in comparison to number of birds at colonies. Okay, from matched historical and recent counts, they were available for 28 colonies, and of these, well, actually, are they more than that? We've just done 2 more. Of these, 20 had declined in size, and 22 had declined in numbers of nests recorded. And 6 had shown a slight to moderate increase. Okay, for the status, so in several of those locations, new colonies were established in the vicinity of the abandoned colonies. So the birds hadn't left the area altogether. But in spite of this, there were 16% fewer birds were reported, and 24% fewer nests were reported. So it's an estimated rate of decline of 10% over the past 3 generations. So they remain vulnerable, is what we assess them as. But of course we are still busy with surveying the colonies, and I have hopes that we'll find more birds in KZN. But from surveys I've done to date, most of the colonies seem to have shrunk. Okay, just a summary of the recent recorded census data. This is the breakup of percentage of birds in each province. So Free State has the majority of the birds, but Mpumalanga and KwaZulu-Natal are pretty close to that. But we're hoping that we'll find more colonies in Lesotho. Okay, so of course I end up with a plea, especially for the KZN people. If anyone knows of where any colonies are, please do contact me, because it makes the survey so much easier if you can go exactly to the place and count. And of course, if people can count them, it'll be even better. But this is the kind of information we're looking for. The coordinates of the site, the number of nests and adults. If you are there in the evening to count the additional adults coming, whether it's at water, and whether you're looking north, south, east, west, or anything in between. Okay, the height of cliff, and then if you can photograph it. But I'd be really grateful if anyone knew of any colonies here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Are there any questions for Catherine?